Thank you, Kuni. So before we jump into the next session and the next reset, quickly look around and look at someone that you haven't seen today and just give them a smile. So let's just get the energy going in the room. Say hello, give a wave, make sure everyone's happy and healthy and awake. And our bellies are still digesting after lunch, the delicious lunch that we had. Right. So the idea of stress, there's a lot of negativity often when people talk about stress. The reality is it's part of our DNA. It's necessary for us to get going. Sometimes you need a little bit of that drive to get to the next project or to complete it. It's when we get to chronic stress, that's when it becomes an issue. And especially when we look at the health of the farmer or the business leader, we need to make sure that we sustain our health. And obviously chronic stress leads to adrenal fatigue, which leads to chronic illness. So a quick question that I want to pose to each of you, just in your own contemplation. On a scale from 1 to 10, so 1 being complete burnout that you feel on a constant basis, and 10 being feeling energized on a daily basis. Just silently right now, check in with yourself. Where would you rate yourself from 1 to 10? And if you have your number, even if it's a little bit scary, ask yourself if you can think of one thing that drains your energy on a daily basis. And once you've identified that, then reframe, what is the one thing that actually charges your energy on a daily basis? So my invitation to you is, how can you do more of the activity that recharges your energy? And how can you protect your own energy like you protect your harvest? Thank you.
All right, now we talk about plant vitality. And the intro note is by Marius Boshoff, Villa Crop Protection, and Jenna Millane is a general manager from Meeson World. And then the discussion lead is Yaki Millet. So, yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jackie Millet. I'm an early generation seed potato grower from the Lydenburg area. An Afrikaans boerseun, which has now been tasked to come and sit on this hot seat after a professional like Annelie. So bear with me, but we're going to try and get as much information out of these panelists with the expertise they come and bring to us today. With 10,000 years of potatoes being eaten, it still boggles my mind how we still struggle to farm potato effectively in today's conditions. And with everything that's been set up today, with the dry conditions coming and monitoring being so important, to know or to measure is so important. But how do we measure? What do we measure? And how do we use that information to grow what we grow more effectively? Every farmer has been pressurized to grow potatoes more cost effective with the pressure that's been mounting and everything that's the dark clouds around us. So let's give these panel members each time to introduce themselves. And I think also take the time to tell the audience why you're here today and why you've been chosen here and what your expertise is. I think if we can start from Stefan.
Thank you, Jackie. Sorry, my name is Stefan Steenekamp. I'm from Intelligro. We are one of the largest agrochemical and plant nutrition biostimulant biological product distributors in the country. My role in Intelligro is forming part of the technical team or the technical marketing specialist, or more common name is agronomist. Each of us has a specific focus, a specific crop. My crop is obviously the best crop, potatoes. And then also we have a region that we are responsible for. So hopefully today, during today's discussion, I will contribute on crop protection, a little bit on fertilizer, biostimulants and biology alongside my panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles.
Thank you, Jackie. My name is Charles Leroux, and I want to thank Willie and the rest of the Potato SA team for this very topical theme for this session, because soil health and plant vitality is a topic that resonates with me personally. I'm involved with a lot of potato growers in South Africa, Southern Africa, all the way to East Africa. And we work with farmers that wants to improve quality and marketable yield. The problem that I see is that with everything that's going on, with so many things that is out of the farmer's control, weather, all the stuff that we've been talking today, the farmer can do everything right. He can do the soil analysis, leaf analysis. He can follow the program to the T, use all the newest products, but he can still not explain what's happening in the plant when things are not going as planned. And that is exactly where DRIS fits in. So DRIS is an acronym that stands for Diagnose and Recommendation Integrated System. Think of DRIS as the agronomy engine that sits behind your soil and your leaf analysis. And instead of looking at norms and thresholds, that the way that we used to do it, DRIS looks at the balance of all the nutrients. So if you remember the Milders chart from Varsity, all the theory that explains all the interactions of the elements, DRIS puts that into practice and calculates each and every relationship to each other and presents the data in a very simple way for us to understand what is happening in the plant, what is suppressing, and also what is antagonistic. And that puts the Liebig's law, you remember the Weinfeike, the element that is most limiting is actually determining the potential of your yield. And if you can understand and target that, that'll help you to be able to address the limiting factors in your plant. What DRIS does well is understanding what is causing that limiting factors and calculating exactly what we require to be able to stimulate the plant to react on those elements. And that really changes the whole conversation, and it makes it really topical when we bring it into this conversation, is because we are no longer talking about what is the program, what we give to the plant. It's rather listening to the plant to understand how did the plant react and what the plant was able to use and how the plant is functioning within stresses and the environment that is changing. So I'm really excited. I'm agricultural optimist. because I believe that the Creator has created nature in such a wonderful way. And if we can help bring in harmony in our practice, I think nature can take its course to also assist us to improve soil health and plant vitality. Because I think plant vitality is actually the first step in defense for the plant.
Thank you, Charles. Jenna?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the honor of being here. I think that's really important. But my experience with potatoes definitely started with a tune that goes, I want to be a Simba Chippy. And if anybody remembers that advert, it kind of sticks in the brain like an earworm. And then the second experience is naturally enjoying those chippies. So it's a long history, but I'm a second generation biostimulant and specialized nutritional manufacturer. Medicine was started by my dad, and we have the privilege of experiencing this newer generation, this newer kid on the block, from chemical to nutritional, of being this biostimulant and finding our space, finding our synergy, finding where we fit in, because we want to be able to produce more with less water, less predictable climate, less healthy soil, and be able to provide the farmer with a greater return on investment. And that is more than just yield. That is looking right at that bottom line and making sure that whatever you're putting in, you're getting more out. So that is the role that medicine plays. That is why I'm sitting here today. And I look forward to the discussions to follow.
Thank you. Marius?
Thanks, Jackie. I immediately realized I was late, and then I realized I'm the oldest on the panel. So I look good because I've been working with chemicals for the last 30 years. I guess that's my background. I'm currently the managing director for Vela Crop Protection. I've been in the industry for the last 30 years, as I've mentioned, spent 27 years in crop chemistry, and currently also the chairman for CropLife. So proudly, yes, supporting the chemical industry as well. I couldn't help but realize and see it in the previous panel, that sort of little bit of conflict between the mineral and the carbon suppliers, right? So hopefully we can get through this panel without too much debate.
Now, hopefully there's enough debate, because it's all about those biostimulants, and it's about chemicals and how do they actually fit in today's life. You want to carry on and give us your slide then, Marius?
Sure. As we bring it up, I think that very first slide, we'll keep it up there because it sort of frames where we're at, both in the value chain, and surely we are here in support of the farmer and making sure that the farmer remains profitable on the farm. But if we can go to that first slide, please. Our job, and let's call ourselves agronomists, but the whole industry is so vast in terms of the support that is required for a farmer. And it's not just agronomists, there's also lawyers, there's also engineers, there's also predicant, maybe psychologists, I don't know. But the reality is we have to make sure that we can bring a few things together on the farm. And I'm going to try and see if I can get all of them on there, right? Our job is really to make sense of all of these elements on the farm in such a way, in such a balanced way, that we ensure that one thing is making sure that the farmer remains profitable. And if we look at these things, they are all interlinked. I can't help but experience thousands of new products coming onto the market. And if you believe every salesman who claims 100 kilogram more than the control, then we could all be billionaires, right? So 1,000 products by 100 kilos, I'm sure we'll all retire. But there is a link in understanding the complexity and how these things work together. Now, for those of you who are running a plant, a formulation plant, I know certification of seed potatoes. If we talk about what is required of a food processing entity, I'm sure McCain and the likes is here as well. We all know that we have to go through what is called generally the establishment of good practice, whether it be GMP, good manufacturing practices, whether it's good agricultural practices, whether it's ISO systems, and there are numerous of those, and they're all really aimed at making sure that we are doing the right thing. And that good practice needs to be audited in many cases. third-party audits. So when we go back to 1997, when our fruit export industries, particularly to the EU, were confronted with a new implementation of good agricultural practices, it was then called Europe Gap. Now it's called Global Gap. And so there's a third-party audit on every single part that exports, and even to some of the local higher-end processing and retailers in the country. And at the time, there was this concept of integrated crop health management, or integrated crop management, and later on also looking at integrated crop management. And if you look at the big wheel, you'll recognize everything that could possibly be addressed on a farm. And each one of those elements deserves a risk analysis in itself. But for the sake of the argument, trying to bring all of these elements together lays the foundation, not just for integrated crop health management, but it also looks at elements like integrated pest management, all rolling up into good practices. And those good practices, if you apply them right, can be seen as regenerative practices as well. So if we look at one element of that specifically around crop protection, which is my area of expertise, we talk a lot about IPM. So when we refer to ICM, IPM, these are sort of the foundation for an industry that's developed in a science-based environment. So if we look at those principles, and it's my last slide, it really starts and it follows a logical progression on a farm. Imagine you're a farmer, you deal with every single risk that you have on that farm, but for argument's sake, let's make it root knot nematode on potatoes. You will have to look at that specific segment and then ask and talk yourself through this whole integrated pest management principle. Essentially what you're saying is, what do I do to prevent? How do I make sure that the plant vitality, the plant health fundamentals are in place? And there are numerous aspects there, from nutrition, irrigation management, soil health. You can look at all of those elements. A lot of those elements are foundational. In plant pathology, we talk about predisposition of plants. A weak plant, just like a weak animal, are likely to get sicker easier. So the principle is to lay a very strong horizontal foundation for plant health. A second logical progression to think of every single risk element, whether it be biotic or abiotic, is your decision tools, your observation tools. Observe constantly. We've heard it quite a lot over the last two sessions, but constantly and in time, observe what's going on in your farm. And those could be anything from decision support, scouting, remote sensing, but it could also potentially include weather monitoring. And I think that's a clear position that we have taken as Villa to support our customers with a good weather-based foundation system there. It's only then that you again start considering, if I'm running past a certain threshold, I need to intervene. I need to intervene within a very specific time. And when I do that, I consider what are my cultural practices. We've heard earlier crop rotation and how important that is. So cultural practices that leads to a good foundation. Consider what biological options do I have. And if nothing exists that could address the threshold at economical levels, then you consider your chemistry. And once you talk through every single segment on your farm, this is where you're likely to end up. So I'm going to leave it there, Jacques, and maybe just go back to this slide and leave that one there.
Yeah, thank you. You've mentioned now that biological and chemical has to go hand in hand. Villa has typically been the hard chemical type of guy, I think, on the block. Would you say this is the end of the era for hard chemicals? Are we going more biological?
Let me try and answer. And I think hard chemicals is a hard word. The reality is chemistry is so vast. And if you look at the new generation chemistries that's come in over the last 2-3 decades, there's a huge difference amongst them. Key to note that our regulation has already communicated the intention to ban all highly hazardous compounds. So let's for a second call hard chemicals highly hazardous compounds or restricted use compounds. Typically your organophosphates, your fumigants, these sort of products. So if you ask a farmer in the Sunveld with sandy type of soils whether they can do without fumigation and some of these hard chemicals, is going to be a tough job to do. And I think those are the areas that we need to do a lot of work in finding replacements for the phase-out products. However, if you look at some of the latest chemistry and some of the mode of actions, so fungicides, insecticides, plant growth regulators, adjuvants, there's a huge development. And just to prove that matter, globally, in 2024 is the latest data we have. Globally, the crop protection, the hard part of it, was approximately, it depends on what source you're looking at, about 75 to 80 billion US dollars. At the same time, biologicals are about $7 to $10 billion. But working from a slow base, the crop protection industry will grow at 3 to 6% compounded over the next 10 years, whereas the biologicals we've seen are growing at 10 to 15%. So there's a huge focus on biologicals, but there are challenges there.
Stefan, maybe if you can come in there first. So integrated crop health management. I mean, that's like a long word and it entails a lot. What do you guys see as, from a Intelligro side, maybe, how do you bring that to the farmer?
No, Yaki, it's a difficult question because it's all relative, the word integration, especially when we are considering chemicals and biologicals. But if you could take it a step back and look at today's program as well, when we start from the integrated crop management, start from the cultivar, the table of processing. Where's the farm located? For instance, on long-term pass or at sea level in the Sandveld. Is it under irrigation, dryland? And taking all those factors into consideration, we start to form a picture. After we have that picture, we start to, then the next question normally I ask is, when I sit with the crop advisor or the farmers, is say that, what is your practices that you are currently following on your farm, the operational part of the farming? Following that, I want to actually give an example. If we use a Y and an X-axis graph with the distribution of a normal distribution graph. On the far two ends, we have the radical left and right, whether it's hard chemicals and hard biology. There's definitely a movement of the farmers from the one side, moving from your hard chemicals, acknowledging that they base their programs on chemical, the normal chemical program, but they want to add certain biological products into that program. That is their perspective, or the farmer or the agronomist or the advisor's perspective on a integrated program. It's chemical with added biological products. Whether it's wrong or right, it doesn't bother me that much because they are following an integrated program that fits for that field or farm. On the other side, you have farmers that wants to follow a more biological program with added chemicals or your normal chemicals in our program. So from our side, and I believe everybody in this room, as we have other suppliers, other distributors here, is to follow a program which is based on basic sound science when making decisions, starting from where you go from your insecticides, fungicides, all the way down to nematicides, herbicides, is to ask the question, what is the problems, the specific problems that you are facing on the farm? Based on that, to decide also whether it's a winter or summer planting. For instance, now in the northern parts, they were faced with late blight, high pressure late blight. Were the programs in an integrated manner or positioned for integrated manner, or were they sufficient to face the late blight pressure, for instance? And then also asking, one thing that I'm struggling to see in the industry as a whole is, do we understand our products? Because there's the 4 R's. I want to replace the previous R with reason. Do we understand the reason why we are using that specific biological or chemical or whatever product it is? And the reason for that is we can have a very good base plate or a basis from working for that season. Let's use PTM as a potato tuber moth as an example. We have the products. We think we are using an integrated program because we are rotating between trade names. But as a matter of fact, we are just rotating between this. We are using the same active ingredients to some extent with different trade names. So positioning the right IRAC groupings, that we all know, but do we know when we are using a contact insecticide or a translaminar insecticide or a systemic insecticide, or which active ingredient provides both or more of those actions? When we understand that, how do we position those specific active ingredients, and I'm including now the biologicals, for instance, we don't have virus-containing products yet, but your BT products or Metarhizium or Bavaria bassiana, where do we position them when acknowledging pest pressure? So it's a holistic approach. We must consider all the different variables contributing to our potato program, specifically not only to a farm specific, but to a field, specifically to a field. And then secondly, do we follow a transdisciplinary approach? Do we consider our fertilizer program, the normal crop protection program, our seed or the seed supplier, weather conditions, and so on? And that forms part of the integrated program. And then the last question is the most important, and Ms. Fronin mentioned, is that farmers are not cash cows. It must make financially sense when we can have the best integrated program on the market. But if it doesn't make financially sense, we cannot use it. And that's where the one problem is integrating this large amount of information. And the second thing is then, does it make financially sense? For each rand we're going to spend, do we get more, equal or more than that 1 rand that we're going to spend?
Thank you. So we need to measure, and we need to have that information to get all that knowledge or use that knowledge. Charles, is that where you guys come in typically? I mean, is that information that you can help us gather to make all of those difficult decisions?
Yes, definitely. I really like the term integrated crop health management rather than just looking at pest management, because I think the industry acknowledge that whatever we do in our practice, in the products that we use, it has an effect on the plant. And that's where we come in. We look at the plant to understand how did the plant react to our intervention, if it is biological, if it is mechanical or hard chemical. The plant will tell us what is happening, and it will have an effect. We can see in some of the programs, there's always a biostimulant in to try and assist the plant through that process. But when we start looking proactively at that, we can actually look at the plant or help the plant to be more to help the plant vitality, to be able to be more resilient to the different stress factors that comes along. So measuring the soil first and then the plant is definitely part of this whole crop management protocol.
Jenna, you guys measure something else than what Charles is measuring again. Tell us a little bit about what do you see when you do that measurements and that biology that goes into that.
So we measure a number of things, but yes, we do also measure the soil. We measure the vitality of the soil. So it's more than just the carbon. It's what carbon becomes available. And then also the biodiversity or the microbial diversity in the soil, as well as the nutrients and how it gets unlocked for the plant to actually be able to use it. But it's much more than that. It's the measurement of climatic soil construct, the water quality, bricks, leaves, it's everything. And when you put all of those things together cumulatively, it's the interaction within the plant to ensure that you have a secure yield, whether that be from the chemical support or the nutritional support or the biostimulant that enhances all three aspects. That's what we measure. That's what we're wanting to aim is the plant not only strong enough, but can it actually go to yield, and can it survive the next rotation, whether it be a quick harvest crop or a perennial crop or a tree, but what are you carrying over between your harvest periods? So we definitely measure the rotation, the programs holistically. And yes, we start with soil, and then water plays an enormous role, because the water quality affects the product quality, it affects your yield at the end of the day as well. And that interaction is sometimes overlooked. It is the importance of water, but understanding where your plant's feet are can give it the power that it needs to be able to get to harvest, to get to yield.
Right. So this whole biological approach with the regen that we've been hearing the whole time, where do I go to with that? What do I do with that information? Is that now typically, Stefan, you guys that give me a solution when I come with this little piece of paper and say, this is how it looks, this is the plan?
Yeah, that's also, it's a good question, also difficult to some extent. But that's what I mentioned. The previous point is it's not a general approach. One farmer should not walk out of this conference room and say, I'm going to do this A, B, and C. Must consult with the correct, whether it's an advisor, agronomist, or supplier, whatever. The point being is that specific soil, specific climatic conditions, we're referring again to sea level and then up to 2,000 meters above sea level, there's definitely going to be a difference in soil biology and challenges that are going to be faced. Going back to where to incorporate that is where the farmer, looking at the pipeline or the industry pipeline, is to say, we have the farmer, the distributor, and the supplier. How do we communicate? Because it's not the farmer's responsibility to figure out this type of information. It's the supplier, distributor, the whole network, the universities, all the different factors or role players in the line that should funnel this information in a responsible manner towards the farmer and say, these are the options. For infra applications, for foliar applications, or ground applications, wherever it fits in, this biological or this chemical product is not going to work here, and this is reason A, B, and C. However, the alternative is to use product D, E, and F, and this is the reason for this specific, because your climatic conditions, you have lower solar radiation, temperature threshold, your circumstances are much more conducive for a BT applied biological product compared to somewhere in the middle of in the Sandveld or in Tomberg when summer approaches. So there's a whole discussion that needs to be led, and that's why I said it goes back, throw the ball back to the industry, including ourselves, to say it's our responsibility to make sure the correct and responsible information is transferred to the farmer to ensure that they receive the correct advice.
I would like to build on that because I think you raised a really important question is what do we do with this information? Where do we take it? One of the previous panelists also brought that up and said that with all this additional information, this can actually bring noise instead of clarity. And we need to make sense of the data and get to actionable insights. So when we bring all of this information together, it's we need to understand that we are not trying to make a one-size-fits-all plan or a textbook scenario that'll be localized for Limpopo or for the Free State. With processing data, we need to go very specifically to farmer level or to field level and see how did our plant react in the season that is unfolding. If we look at Marius's picture, we can see that weather plays a really big role, and every season will be different. So we need to forget about an ideal situation where we've got a really nice plan and it will pan out the way that we work or how we plan it. We need to be able to measure and timeously be able to monitor and get that into a different management protocol that we can apply on farm level.
Right.
I'd like to respond also because I think in terms of data and how we tend to do an analysis and then take it somewhere and say, this is what I see at the soil at the beginning of the season. We need to increase the rate of taking samples. And I do think it happens, but it becomes really quite expensive if you start looking at that. And it's so important to do so. Many years ago, I was working on a farm, avocado farm. I was also responsible for the conservation area and KwaZulu-Natal mist belts and severely degraded forest areas. And the very first thing I had to do was try and rehabilitate those mist belt areas. And so I started going around and there's a lot of yellowwood trees in the natural areas around us. So we started getting all of those seeds together and started planting, I remember, more than 8,000 yellowwood trees within all of these little mist belt forests. And they all died, which was quite sad because it takes 2 years in a nursery to get to a plantable yellowwood. And so I consulted an ecologist then, and he said, well, you will never get that because you're dealing with a climate community tree that you are trying to force into a pioneering community. And so if we look at any biodiverse soil today, and I thought that question on the glyphosate was really a good question. So if you look at any given condition, if you apply glyphosate, for instance, you are going to create dead roots, which are going to stimulate the biodiversity, but only for a short time. So if you take a sample of that soil shortly after the glyphosate, you're going to conclude that glyphosate is good for your soils. right? But we know that there are APMA, which are metabolites of glyphosate, and that leads to a shift in the biodiversity. I think it's important that we really have to make sure that how do we interpret a specific soil analysis or a leaf analysis at a specific time, and how does that fit with the phenology of the crop? And then only then see it holistically and manage the ecosystem rather than one single analysis.
So it's evidently that we have to have a balanced approach here. I mean, we or me as a farmer, I can't just jump in here and say, I'm going to do everything right now. What are the standard approach errors that you guys see here? What should I not do when I go back to the farm? Marius.
Well, probably what you should do, and I think in many cases in dealing with L registrations primarily in the country, is you're looking at predictability as far as possible, right? Any businessman will tell you that predictability is important. So make sure that you are reading product labels extremely well, and make sure that you get professional advice on those things. Because I see a lot of the problems that we face in the industry literally starts there. Something that was done too late, applications were done wrongly, and we're trying to get a lot out of these products that they are simply not designed to do. So I think that's one thing, is to say, do not expect silver bullets anymore.
Right.
That's certainly one thing.
Okay. Jenna, soil biology is the buzzword, and we want to all improve that. But when does that actually start improving? I mean, do I have to see an increase in soil biology before I start seeing an increase in the crops or the yields? Does it work the other way around? Is it something that I can measure today, and 5 years later I can say, okay, this is a progressive growth in my biology, I'm going in the right direction? Is it something that you guys help assist, see? Is it something that we should feed?
It's another one of those, there isn't a silver bullet, and it's definitely not a litmus test where you measure it today and it's going to be the same tomorrow. That is such a good proverbial question of, well, when will you start seeing the results? And I'm going to use a little bit of something of what my dad teaches me. He goes, well, how long is a piece of string? How often are you measuring it? How consistent are you measuring? And what are you measuring? Because if you're trying to measure control versus yield, you're looking at a different parameter. So it's so funny, because we had a very good debate about, well, when will I start to see the difference? And again, it comes down to what you're measuring. But the rule of thumb is, if you're not seeing a difference, whether it be positive or negative, something has to change. So if you're seeing the same thing over and over, something's not working. If you change and you tweak and you shift and you pivot, then you should see change. But what change truly depends on the grower, where you're growing and what you're looking for. If you are struggling with nematodes, will that be the change? Will you be measuring the yield because your nematodes are more controlled, or are you going to be measuring the rate of control versus the yield? So it's a little bit of a difficult one to answer. It really is, how long is a piece of string? But it's also about your patience and the journey. There's a reason why they call it have faith like potatoes. You really have to have the patience, and you really have to be able to have the faith in your program and follow it holistically and commit to it. Because if you're going to chop and change between, you will not see the benefits either way. I hope I answered that enough.
You did. Is that also then, you'd say, the biggest mistake farmers make? Chopping, changing, not sticking to the same thing?
Yeah, it comes down to that season again. If you're not going to give the solution a chance to actually take, you're going to be changing before you even see the benefit. There's a lot of patience, and it's difficult when you're chasing that bottom line the whole time. And that is what the farmer wants to see. They want to see that bigger yield. And I always say, well, yield is a little bit like turnover. If you're constantly measuring your turnover, you are going to be a little bit vain. You need to be able to see that return on investment, because that's where your sanity is going to lie.
Right.
That sanity right at that bottom of, yes, you're spending a bit more on biology, but perhaps you're not having to put in other inputs, as many other inputs in. Maybe you're putting in more nutrition, therefore you're not having to need as many remedies. So you need to be able to take that holistic return on investment. Yes, your yield is important. Yes, it's your lifeblood. that at the end of the day, you have all your inputs at cost as well. You had a great yield, but at what cost?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think especially potato farmers are a little bit impatient. I also grow kiwis nowadays, and that's one thing that learns patience. It really takes you a long time to build up that soil. You see it over time. I mean, it's vines growing and all of that. Stefan, is that something that you guys can come with a better solution and say, yeah, I can almost promise you a result at the end of the season. Do this and this and that. Come with that little book at a price.
My heart wants to say yes, but my brain says no. So no, that is the. I think that it. Every time you ask me a question, I said this is a difficult question, but this might be. But no, it's not difficult. It's challenging. I wish that we could say. I wish that we could say that if we could put on an etiquette or a label to say, you will have increase of X%. I run away of such labels. And the reason is that specific, under very specific conditions, those trials were done under specific conditions, controlled conditions, maybe even under growth chamber, specific cultivar. There's so many assumptions made also to keep you on a path that you can make a p-value significant suggestion. So from my side, I don't like at all, I won't advise you will have an increase. If I can use biostimulants, and it was mentioned a couple of times, I think biostimulants on that point is a very gray area. The reason for that is with your L registrations, we know we must at least have a 95% control or suppression of the problem or the pest or the disease. With biostimulants, you will see on a lot of the labels there's an increase in yield or abiotic stress management. And in all fairness, I understand biostimulants are difficult. And if you look at the 5 categories, we have humic, fulvic acids, amino acid seaweeds, biologicals, and then your plant extracts. But the question is, that's why I said for reason, if we know we have a potential yield of, for example, 60 tons under irrigation for this specific cultivar, with saying the fertilizer program is in check, we have the right cultivar, we have the right farming practices, our program is in place. Now we have abiotic stress factors, ambiotic stress factors, like Charles also mentioned, decreasing the potential each time. So we try to protect the potential crop, the potential yield of the crop. Hopefully, by doing everything right during the season and by the grace of God that we can get to that part of the season, we will hopefully protect the crop, the yield of the crop at the end of the season. So I wish I could say, Jackie, when we sit in your boardroom as well, to say, will this provide an increase? But what we do know is if we follow the steps correctly, we also are guided by a moral compass to do the right thing, provide the correct advice or the correct agronomic advice, not thumbsuck information or backyard trials. I think then we get to a point where we see trials on a specific farm, we see certain biological products or biostimulants or chemical products used in combination that we see a steady increase in your yield, yes, on farm specific, field specific.
Right. Jenna or Morris, I don't know who's going to answer this one, but there's lots of guys coming past the door and say they've got this, what's it, snake juice, or they've got that muti, and how do you know which one is good and which one's not? Which one can you believe in? There's not a L registration as such on these products.
Yeah.
Marius, help.
I'll go, Gina. But
There used to be L's, but they have moved.
No, I think, and again, I think there's a lot of debate in the regulatory environment, and I know Debbie is also here from SABU in debating how do we evaluate these integrated programs. The current regulation is sorry, am I losing this? The current regulation.
No, I think it's a battery thing, maybe.
Oh,
There we go. That sounds better again.
See if I can move this. Sit still. So the current regulation, I think, when we deal with the different types of registrations, you are, as a farmer, you are covered, and to a large extent, our industry is self-regulated when you deal with a specific L registration. Now, in short, what is an L registration? L registration is when you make a claim of control. and you have certain guarantees. The fundamental guarantee is that if you are using this product according to the label, strictly according to the label, then you should get a 90% control. That is what an L registration means in the country under Act 36 of 1947. Once you start talking about integrated programs, that's very difficult to compare programs with programs and run trials with so many variables. And I think that's where the difficulty is. The adoption rate of L registrations are pretty easy because you expect that product to work. And if it doesn't, you usually put in a complaint against the company. And I think that's where it diverges. We certainly recognize the value that biologicals will bring into the market, but you cannot find the same consistency in these trials because you're dealing with a very difficult or a more complex system. But working on compatibility, first of all, making sure that these things do play well together in a tank, they do play well together in the soil or on the plant or on the surface, and then making use specifically and positioning during the phenological cycles. You might find that biostimulant could have a huge impact. I find Prof. Stein's work very interesting on the temperature and the CO2 levels in the growth chambers. The reality is we have to look at how many hours accumulative do we see stress from the climate. So if we take an example of 35 or 38 degrees, how many hours above that can a potato plant and different varieties take before you knock off 50% of the yield? And we need to understand those things better. And I think that's in that space of plant vitality, biostimulants, where there's a lot of work and some really great products that's coming through the line there. That's our perception. So let's find ourselves at a space where we balance the expectations. If you have that L registration, you are covered. If you talk about biologicals, show the data. Show me the data that you've done in South Africa under my conditions. Let's demonstrate this one season. Let's see how it goes.
Thank you. Charles, you want to add to that?
Yes, I think I don't sell any product, so I'm maybe more comfortable to respond to this kind of question. I think the farmers are being confronted with that on a daily basis. These guys are coming around and they're convincing the farmer with some on really good products, others maybe not so good. And at the end of the day, that farmer still needs to make a decision on that. Mm-hmm. What we've seen is that the plant can actually tell us how effective some of these products can be. We've got some really interesting results where farmers have sent in samples, a control and a trial, and the balance of the plant actually indicates how plants react, because we know that it's not only one element that has been mobilized. The whole everything has a knock-on effect, and you need to look at the total range and a more holistic view as to the effect of some of the products. We've got so much so that guys have changed the application of products just because knowing and understanding how the plant reacts to some of these products can be really interesting and valuable. Right. So I think in today's world, it's really easy to send in a sample and do your own kind of trials and see what is working on your farm and in your management structure. Okay. I think if we tie that back to the biologicals, I think that is exactly the case, that the results that one farmer gets towards his neighbor could be very different. And a lot of that boils down to how is the soil, what is the environment for that biologicals to operate. And if we can balance the environment, we can make the efficacy of those biological products much more beneficial to the plant. Right. So we need to be able to measure to be able to get the efficacy.
We keep on talking about measuring, but I mean, you talk about all this data, monitoring, soil analysis. There's so much going around in it. I mean, which are the most valuable to that? I can't go out and test for every single thing. I can't test at every single lab. Is there specific things that you can give pointers to with your expertise and say, that's the most important things that you should look at?
Yes, I think from a practical point of view, we've really boiled it down to looking at the micro and macro elements in the soil. and bringing in the structure. Hendrik in the previous session talked about what you need to add to your analysis. So having a really comprehensive soil analysis is crucial, because looking at the balance of the chemical balance and the physical balance could really help you to understand what is we like to talk about the house or the home of the biology. So if you understand the compaction factor and the aeration factor in the soil, I think that is probably your low-hanging fruit that you can look at. And then from a leaf analysis, a leaf really can tell you what is happening. So what is unique in the way that we analyze leaf analysis is we can combine a tissue analysis with a sap analysis. And why that is relevant is we interpret the tissue to understand what happened in the past. So for the last 3 to 4 weeks, what did the plant use to build the structure of the plant? And then we look at the sap to understand what is currently available. And that really changes the whole conversation to how does the plant react, and what can we see from those trends to tell us how do we need to be proactive in addressing the limiting factors before it becomes a symptom that we can't react to.
Jenna, where would you then say is the greatest opportunity for technology and real-time monitoring to improve producer decision-making over the next 5 years?
Data integration. It's all good to have weather stations and soil samples and leaf samples, but there needs to be a point where you can put it together. Yep. And that is where the partnership between the grower and the agronomist really comes together. The partnership can also be obviously with the producers or the manufacturers, but they have to have that skill to see things holistically. So my go-to place would be the agronomist, someone that can really look at all these different tests and say, right, what am I looking at and what is the way forward? And that is where the value lies. That is that data integration, because at the end of the day, it's that so what? I have my soil sample, it's been measured, but so what? Yeah. I have my water, but what is that? How does that relate to my soil? So the integration is probably the most important part.
Right. Marius, if a producer is skeptical about this whole biological and regen farming practice, what practical proof of on-farm indicators would you say would convince that farmer to actually go that route?
Well, I mentioned it earlier, and I think that integration also brings in that people element, right? At the end of the day, people do business with people. Your crop advisor, the likes of IntelliGrow and many others, they get onto the farm quite regularly and they build that relationship with the farmer. They know how it works. And I like it that, again, I say it's a self-regulating system, because farmers are not all that gullible, right? Come and prove to me that this has value. And I think from that perspective, that institutional knowledge that exists helps farmers to make a decision. If there's a new product that there are massive claims out there that this is going to do everything for you on the farm, then surely there needs to be data. There needs to be some form of science behind it. You should be really, really skeptical of anyone that comes in and say, well, you can use it this way and that way and that way and that way, and by the way, it will control all your pests as well. I think that type of advice is certainly has no place in the world of science. And I think that the robustness of a system of demonstrating commercial opportunities before you are claiming is going to be important for farmers to listen to.
Okay. Maybe before we open the floor, from each of you, one thing that the farmer should implement tomorrow. I think it's a question that we can ask every panelist for today, but Stefan, starting with you, what should I do tomorrow differently from what I did yesterday?
I like the saying that Kuni had this morning about operational excellence and innovational excellence. We are trying always to innovate and trying to do better and better and make those jumps, like Kuni referred to. But what I really think is that one can see in some farms, and not all farms, is to learn from each other, but also to do the basics right. So your fertilizer programs, from maybe depending on soil type and so on, is to make it more frequent fertilizer applications, for instance. Or secondly, when considering your crop protection program, to make sure if you understand it, or your crop advisor or your agronomist understand it, to make sure why, or ask the questions, why are we positioning these products, a product that costs R1,000 per hectare, why are we positioning this expensive application here and not 2 weeks later or 4 weeks later? Why for this pest and not for another pest? You must start to ask difficult questions. And my thing that I would like to leave for the farmers is to challenge your advisors, whether it's your fertilizer or your crop protection advisor, your agronomist. Start to challenge each other. That's the only way we can move from good to great, or from operational excellence to innovational excellence.
Thank you. Charles?
I think we can stop guessing and start measuring, monitoring, and managing. If I bring a few of this together, I think one of the low-hanging fruit is just to look at what Potato SA is doing with their platform. That's maybe one of the areas where we can bring all of this data together at a centralized place. So a really easy thing could be just to log on to the Potato SA portal or platform and bring in your weather data, weerstasie, request your DRIS analysis on it, look at your NDVIs and all of that in one centralized place, because then an agronomist can also use all of the data together to make better decisions. Right. So I would really say, with all the data, we need to be able to get more valuable, actionable insights.
Jenna?
I'm going to emulate both of them and say what I would add to that is make a change. We all don't want to be doing the same thing because we know we're going to get the same result. So pick one thing and then commit to it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to be able to have the courage to do it. They talk about a handful of perfect zero wasters is not as valuable as 1 million imperfect regenerative farmers. So take the first step. Work with your consultants, your agronomists, your producers, your whoever's drawing up your programs, and just find that one thing that'll make the difference. But have the courage to do it. That would be my takeaway.
Thank you. Maurice?
It's bad to be the last because
They've said it all.
Yeah, just along the same lines that, there's no shortage of data and tools and products and advice and having to bring all of these things together. But challenge yourself as a farmer. Ask yourself, what am I going to do differently this time round? Because I think this is where the crossroads for new, that jump that Kuni was talking about. We really need to think about it differently. We know that there's a whole world of AI opening up. There's precision agriculture. There's decision agriculture. So all of these things need to come together, but then challenge yourself. Am I doing anything differently? And if not, why waste the money?
I hear you. Thank you. Guys, opportunity from the floor. Anyone wanting to ask some questions to the panel?
Thanks. Hi, I'm the Debbie from Sabo that Marius mentioned, and I'd just like to build on what he was talking about there. And I think one of the reasons why the Slanggif has such a bad name is because of the marketing that was used back then and sort of the burn of the industry that came along with it. And nowadays, I'm not quite sure that our growers understand the amount of research and development and testing that is going into a lot of the products that are on our markets at the moment. And it is also not true that biologicals are not regulated. As soon as they have any claim of control of a pest, they have to be registered under Act 36 of 1947 and specifically have an UL number. So if you get approached by anyone that claims that it does control a particular pest, you should find that UL number on the label. And conversely, from the biostimulant aspect, those are also regulated under the fertilizer arm, and that has an M number. And that unfortunately becomes a lot harder to achieve because the way that the regulatory pathways are set up is that it has to show or indicate improvement in growth and improvements in yield. And as we've heard throughout today, it is all a big intertwined network. And many of the biostimulants work on various pathways at the same time. So definitely proving yield becomes extremely challenging. And so therefore, for any product to show you from the biostimulant perspective that they will definitely improve yield is extremely challenging, because many trials are done on small plots, etc., under controlled conditions or under predictable conditions. And the importance or the benefit of the biostimulants is in those years when things don't go according to plan, when things don't happen the way that you expect them to. And as a result, that's why it becomes very difficult to showcase that and to show it from farm to farm. So that is the importance of understanding the regulatory framework, and we'll discuss that a little bit later, that is your safety net. That is what you should be looking for on those products and those great salespeople that come to your farm, knowing that there is a legislative framework to protect you so that you don't have a poor experience and get burnt with those feedback. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's well worth noting. Any other questions?
Yes, afternoon panelists, and I think this question is a bit maybe more for Charles or even Marius. It's a two-parter. For the soil health, how important is it for farmers not to over-irrigate? Because I believe that's something farmers do quite a lot. And then the other part is, how important is a good irrigation scheduling program as well? Because we're talking about programs and soil health and chemicals and all of these things, but the one most important thing is the water we haven't really touched on. So thanks, guys.
Yes.
I want to go. I think in terms of irrigation, it's such a vast area and understanding. And I know Conrad from CRI is here as well. They just did an excellent book for the citrus industry on the principles again of irrigation management. A lot of our farmers are using pivot irrigation, right? I think someone once said that you cannot have good projects in a bad policy environment. And what it means is that if your infrastructure, your ability, if you have something like load shedding, all of the nice talk goes, out of the door. If you can't irrigate and you run that pivot at full speed and you try to put down 25 mils on an evapotranspiration that is huge in any specific week, there are things that are practical that one has to consider. Over irrigation, we know, is just as bad as under irrigation. But again, it predisposes the plant. So I wouldn't venture in there. I think there's going to be a panel discussion later on. But the importance of properly managing and planning your irrigation scheduling is just vitally vital. It's one of those things, if you don't get that right, no amount of biostimulants or crop protection or anything else will fix the vitality of that plant. So by all means, I'm not sure that the right experts are here, Charles.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. I think let's wait for the irrigation experts to discuss that. What I can say from a soil health point of view is we need to manage our soils as an irrigation soil. So if you think of nature, no soils were created to be irrigated. So the capacity for soil to hold that amount of water is really crucial for us to manage. So too much irrigation could perpetuate the issue of compaction and aeration and cause waterlogging and all other anaerobic conditions, which could be a whole different can of worms. So my response to that would be we need to manage irrigation soils for irrigation.
Guys, thank you very much. Our time is up. Panel, thank you very much. It was very insightful. I think the biggest takeaway is almost like that story of a tree. The best day to plant a tree, I think, was yesterday. So let's be proactive and start changing and look at this whole regen and biology thing. I think there's a lot in the future for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, talking about plant health and soil health, what comes to mind is that every farm is different. Soil conditions, etc. I hear it in different regions, and even a farm in itself is different. And therefore, your innovation journey is different than anybody else's journey. Right? The innovation journey starts off with what I call full steam ahead. you've got to ask yourself the question, why do you want to innovate? Okay. Maybe you want to innovate because you have big frictions on your farm. You've got soil. Maybe your friction is soil health. Maybe your friction is plant health. Maybe it's both, all right? And then you've got to ask yourself, what am I looking for? Am I looking to improve my yield by 20%, 30%? And you might say, 30%, couldn't you've got to be joking, you know? But Einstein said, listen, if something doesn't appear impossible from the beginning, it's not innovation. So therefore, you've got to set your targets high. Because it's so easy to think things are not possible. They are very possible, but you need process. You've got to ask yourself, why? What am I looking for? Where will I do this? When will I do it? Because it's about, you've got to be realistic. You've got to have a plan. Everything is process in life, okay? And then you've got to ask yourself, who is involved? Who am I getting involved? What suppliers am I getting involved? And the last one is which? The criteria for your innovation. How much are you willing to spend? How much time are you willing to take in terms of this? So it's your farm, when you're farming, you have process. If you mix up the process, it's a disaster. If you bake a cake, you change the order around of baking a cake, it's not going to work. Innovation works in the same way. It needs process. And we will unpack process a bit more in the other sessions. So just keep that in mind. All right, we are going to start with session 4, the regulatory framework and environment and policy priorities. Well, so the intro note, if I can ask the panel to come forward. The intro note will be by Dr. Alan Ardakre. And discussion lead is Dr. Leandri Hubert. Tea break. Oh, there's a tea break. Sorry, I missed that. I'm so excited about these sessions. I mean, it's just like learning more, right? So we're going to have a 15-minute tea break, and then we'll be back. So take your seats then for the break.